Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Here we are again. And why are we here? Red Rising, the latest Stonemaier game. I have it. I've played it. Let's talk thoughts, comments, pros, cons, everything in between. What do you need to know about it and whether or not it's right for you? Let's do this. So, Red Rising, right? Based on the novels in the first place, the fantasy series where humans are divided throughout the universe into castes, where colors represent how important they are. Better colors, more important, more useful. This concept takes this into a card driven, a little bit of area control esque ish style, and uses variable player abilities as well as 3 scoring mechanisms in order to accomplish this. So, what does it look like? What do you need to know about the actual gameplay? Let me show you that. Then, let's go into the pros, cons, final thoughts, a little bit of everything all rolled into one. So here is the basic setup for Red Rising. You can see the various areas on the board, your fleet tracker up top, your main card deck, your helium container, and then you have all 4 areas: Jupiter, Mars, Luna, and the Institute. The core concept of this game is very simple. Play a card to an area, use the card's ability, so place a card here, then take a card, potentially, usually the top card from one of these other areas, and gain whatever bonus those other areas do. Those other bonuses all interact with the endgame scoring. Now, the endgame scoring conditions are the Institute here with the influence, the fleet tracker, and numbers of helium. You need to reach 7 in all 3 of those areas to be able to initiate endgame scoring. And when I say you, it means that everyone playing, there is one player at least that has reached 7. Not one player that reaches all 3, but one player in each of those areas. So the timing, obviously, then of when you're exceeding or when you're going up that track is going to matter. So you need to have one person having 7 helium, one person has to be on the fleet track at 7, and one person has to have 7 influence. Can be the same person, can be completely different people. All 3 different people, in fact. So all you're doing is that in a nutshell. Now, if you do not want one of the cards that's in said locations, you can take the top card from the deck, and that is where this bonus die comes in, roll it, and get said bonus of whatever it is. And now, you may get the thing that you were trying to avoid because it has all of them on there, but again, risk and reward. On the side here, just off camera, I've got a few of the crests of the actual houses themselves, and they all give you a different asymmetric starting power. So yellow here, you get an extra turn at the end, because otherwise the game is even turns no matter who triggers the end game scoring. Also, if you get the sovereign token, we'll talk about that in a second, you get a top card to not deploy, but just to lay down on the top of one of these locations, sort of to mess with other players potentially. In this case, with the red, just to give you a different view of things, when they gain the sovereign token, they get a helium for free. And so they all give you a little bit of variation of that. So let's talk about the sovereign. I mean, the main thing that the sovereign is used for is at Luna. And so if you are taking the bonus, it'll get you one of your abilities from one of these, essentially. And that may be one of the varied asymmetric powers in terms of endgame scoring. If you take from the Institute, you get to lay one of the influence. If you take, obviously, from Jupiter, you are going to be moving your fleet track up 1 space. And again, Mars, obviously, helium. So if I counted correctly, you can see the color scheme that is here in this game. So you actually have 12 different colors of cards. So not just the base colors that are in the houses that I moved off camera. So you have a little bit of everything else that's going on too, things that you're just going to have to deal with or potentially be aware of. Because they all have different interactions, they all have different strengths, they all have different bonuses, they all have different weaknesses. Now, the tricky thing is that all of these cards interact a little bit differently, and you have to be aware of not only what their power is down here with the little symbol here, or a better one here, if you will, where it says gain a helium, if you can actually read that there. But you also need to be aware of if it's with another red, you're getting 26 extra points there, and you have the bonus points that you get just for having it in your hand in the upper left-hand corner. So you're trying to, well, kind of take this into account, but really what you're going to be trying to do is take these two into account more on an active basis, because that's going to be where the balance of when am I keeping things, when am I discarding things, when am I trying to manipulate the board as well, and how able am I to do that. Because I mean, this one you just get a helium, but this one example with this next brown one, if it's deployed on a gray or an orange, move that card to another location and advance on the fleet track. So you want to know when these other cards are out, because sometimes these cards will be in these piles and sometimes they won't be, and you may not have as much control over that as you want, or depending on the game, the color may not just be there. I mean, this may be the only red card that you have. This may be the only red card on the board. So you cannot guarantee when this stack of cards, and let me be very clear, this stack of cards here is about a third of what actually comes in the game. And so you can see that there's just a ton. And so you can't always predict that you're going to be able to get the next card. So do you take this? Because this is worth 35 points if you have just one other red card. Very simple condition. You don't have to have a named card, because some of the other ones say, okay, named cards. Or this one, for example, the blue one. If you keep it, you have gaining points equal to the number of, fleet position as well. So another way to score points, 2 on this one, to give you even more, for example. There are cards that allow you to assassinate other cards on the board or remove them from the game altogether. There are a few gold cards that allow you to attack or banish cards directly from other people's hands. This isn't one, but for an example, I take my card, I put it down here, I do the ability, then I take from one of the other 3, or if I don't like any of those, I take from the top and roll the die. It's that simple. But the meat of it is all of this text on the bottom of all of these cards. And therein lies the depth of the game. And obviously, between this and the deck that I mentioned before, the plethora of cards, if you will, therein lies people's concern, criticism, or even enjoyment about how much mitigation or how much adaptation that you're going to have to do on a turn-by-turn, game as a whole basis. At the end, all you do is score each card in your hand, the upper as well as the lower. You score your track, your influence, and however many helium you have. And the only negative that you have to worry about is if you have too many cards in your hand, because you can just gain cards and gain cards and gain cards. If you have more than 7 cards, you're going to lose points. Because as they say thematically, you're having to take control and manipulate that many different houses and that many different people, and you can't do it. You reach your limit, and you're going to pay for it. That's it. That is Red Rising in a nutshell. Let's go back to my final thoughts. After having played this now, I can see why this is very much a divisive game in terms of people that like it and people that do not like it. Because of how the game interacts, because how the game is just set up, and the mechanisms in and of itself. Nothing about this game is overly complex. It reminds me in a way as if Seven Wonders was taken and put into more of a board form and allowing you to move those pieces around in that way, in a very abstract sort of my mind working that way sort of thing. First off, I mean, again, with all Stonemaier games, you know the production is going to be there. The production quality is, again, probably second to none in terms of that. And so you know that that is always a guarantee, not only now from the components, but just the storage in the game itself. A pro as well as a con all mixed into one. I mean, you have all of these unique individual cards. I mean, just a massive amount. I'm not even holding them all right now. And that is a good thing because the variability is just massive as you're going through this in terms of all the different colors and which ones they interact with and which ones they're going to be good with and which ones they aren't going to be good with. At the same time, that is one of the biggest cons, I think, is you have people that are going to play this game and they're going to hate it because you can't get the color you want. I have this guy and I need to have him with a blue in my final hand. And I just never have the opportunity to draw blue. And so some people are going to look at it from that perspective. The other perspective that you have to look at it, though, just for the sake of the argument, though, is, well, if I realize I'm not going to get a blue with this guy, ditch him. Ditch him. Ditch him sooner rather than later. Don't get attached to some of these guys. And I mean, that is my biggest fault in games like this. I get one in my head that I want to like, and, with a limited hand size that you have in this game, that can be a blessing or a curse. Oh, okay. I need to have... I pigeonhole myself sometimes in these scenarios. I pull the silver guy that says if you have the most gems at the end of the game, you get 40 points. But if you don't, you're going to lose 30. That's not insignificant. 40 is a lot on these cards. But that sort of pigeonholed me into going after that one specific endgame condition. And that is a detriment. Now, again, that's a flaw of my own play. But if you're like me in that sense, and you have a hard time detaching yourself to the ones that you get at the beginning and that you start formulating a plan for and it doesn't go your way, like, how much do you just change plans because sometimes you just can't mitigate it enough with these cards and with what other people are doing on the board in the first place? Because that is also, let me be very clear, a pro and a con. There is high amount of interaction. Depending on, again, how you want to define high, I'm going to define it as high. Because not only do you have a few cards that are a little straightforward, take that, you also have other cards that are manipulating the cards on the board that do not allow you to then get the one that you want to get. Because now someone has placed a card on top of it, someone has changed piles, and you can't go over and get it at the other pile because you need this specific resource in order to get higher up on the track or higher up influence, whatever it may be. My other concern is that 2 of the 3 endgame scoring conditions, the influence and the fleet tracker, they are distinctly more advantageous than the helium. Now that's my own limited experience. So I'm not going to say that's an end all be all. But the fleet tracker point gain is exponential as you go up. It is not linear. And the influence, if you have the most, again, it's a significant difference. They are each worth 4 points. Whereas the helium, I guess, in a more controlled manner, no matter how many you have, it's always worth 3. But as you move up the fleet tracker, some of those differences between one fleet position and the next are like 6, 7, 8 plus. And the influence, again, if you get influence there, great. You're the most one there, it's 4 each. And you can have 10. And if you end up with one of these class cards that just isn't, one of those, like if you end up with the one that gets you helium, how big of detriment is that? Going back to the pro and con of that card deck, because there are so many, like I mentioned, the replayability is there, but again, the mitigation is just not. The other thing I will say about this is because there is a lot of text on some of the cards, and because you're constantly trying to rearrange your hand to have synergy, not only in terms of the card names, but the card colors, because certain cards have to be with other certain cards name-wise. And there is such a huge deck. Again, the question is, can I get the one I need or not? And playing through this once or twice is not going to give you a full sense of that deck. It's just not. And so this is not a game that is going to be good for a one-off. If you are a person that plays things once or twice and moves on, no. But if you play this multiple times over multiple groups with some similarity, you will start to recognize the patterns. You will start to recognize the way in which playing happens, the way in which you can manipulate the piles at all of the locations, because some of that is not very intuitive, or there is a lot of overhead thinking from that side of things when you first play it once or twice. And again, it's both a positive and a negative depending on what your play style is, and that's okay. But this is not a game that you would take out once every like 6 months and play, I don't think. The combination of those cards and the knowledge base of what is in that deck in the first place is really what I'm talking about. Because the knowledge of the variety in there is really what is helpful in terms of meta gaming after a couple games. Okay, I know I have a card that's going to allow me to get this card even though it's 2 under the others. Or I know I have a card that's going to allow me to manipulate it in this way. Or I know that, hey, there aren't many of these out on the board and I need to go a different route. Ultimately, though, I mean, I felt with similar skill levels, though, that the game is pretty well balanced. I mean, we didn't really have a runaway leader either way. I feel like overall, though, the game is, really pretty well balanced. And so I did not necessarily, even though at the beginning of plays, sometimes feel like there was the chance for a runaway leader. And I will say that, if the skill level is different between players, there is a definite chance of that happening. But with similar levels, you can manipulate things in a similar way. Overall, where are my final thoughts on this game? This is a tough one because I liked it because I like a little chaos. I like a very high tactical nature of this type of game where your strategy can be your strategy, but when the stuff on the board changes in front of you, you got to adapt to it and change with it. Otherwise, your strategy that you were previously going for is going to be thrown out the window. And you can see, as I mentioned earlier, that's something that I sometimes struggle with in a card-specific, character-driven style of game. And so for me, I like this game. But at the same time, I don't love it. So I can see why other people have their opinions of it, what it may. I recognize the manipulation and the ability to color match and take them from where you weren't expecting and dealing with how other people have dealt with them previously and now adapting to that. There's a significant crowd that likes that, and I am usually among them. It's just for some reason this one, from that side of things, doesn't strike as true as I would have preferred. And I can't necessarily give you an exact reason. It's more of the way I just felt. I enjoyed my play, but I'm not sure I enjoyed it enough to be able to play it over other things that are similar at this point. Similar in my collection, but also similar in terms of things I'm looking to get at. It's not a short game, but it's also not a very long game. And how do I want to spend 45 minutes to an hour? There are other things I would potentially be more interested in. At the same time, someone else pulls this out. This is very clearly not a game that I'm just going to say, no, don't like it at all. This is a fun game. If you are expecting what it is, and you know a little bit more of it going in. If you don't, though, again, like I said, you could be very frustrated by some of those situations you're put in. So for me, I'm not sure if it's going to stay in my collection. If I can get something that I think will hit the table more than this, I'll probably trade it. At the same time, I'm not going to be actively pushing it to the trade shelf either. See you later, just not a fan. I enjoyed it. And I guess that's where it puts me. I'm sort of in the middle. So, there you go. That is Red Rising from Stonemaier Games. Hope that was helpful. Hope that was useful. A little bit more insight into my likes and dislikes. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day. See you around. Stay classy.